Hello, everyone, and welcome to your horoscope for the week of September the 25th till October the 1st, 2023. We have quite an intense and really complicated, if that makes sense, week ahead of us because the aspects out there are quite, relevant. They do wish to wrap up certain energies that still remains from the past. It is still lingering from the past, and I'm speaking about more directly about the Venus and Mercury retrogrades, which are still, even though both of these planets are moving forward, they're not out of their shadow path just yet. But this week is going to be quite relevant in that sense because it's possible for big wrap ups, for big, conclusions for these periods in our lives individually, of course, to be drawn. While at the same time, towards the end of the week, we have a really intense super full moon in the sign of Aries, and at the same time the sun and freshly entered the sign of Libra is making some very minor but quite interesting connections with other power players, which will greatly influence our moods. Now let's get to business and let us look at, I'm going to share my screen with you, and let's take a look at the progress of the energies through the week. Before I begin, the 25th of September is the birthday, the solar return from an astrological perspective of Misha. So I would like to wish you a very, very happy, blessed, and prosperous birthday slash solar return. May you be showered by oceans of love because there is nothing else that you would deserve. So, on Monday, on the 25th of September, as I said, we have the sun just freshly moved into the sign of Libra, and this is where it holds an in conjunction, a quincunx with Saturn. Now, this energy is not very easy because Saturn represents limitations, and in the sign of Pisces, this is where it might be inner limitation. For example, why isn't my mood what it should be? Why are these thoughts, these feelings, these emotions, these memories from the past haunting me? Why don't I feel better about something, especially that it already ended? So, this is like a psychological aspect which makes us really, really look at our limitations, especially those which are not concrete, which are not all that much real outside of us. But another way this aspect can play out is that, it might challenge our relationship because the sun is in the sign of Libra, which rules one on one alliances, partnership, relationships, where you need to be balanced with a person or with a group of people or with an institution. So, this is where Saturn also makes us a bit, suspicious of our relationships in the sense that why isn't this evolving the way I need it to be? Is the other person or whoever takes the other one's position, is are they listening to me? Do they actually get me, or are they just saying? Are they true or are they not? So these, this aspect can, make us be bombarded by certain question marks which are not really grounded in reality, yet still the feeling of it is enough. So this might be a little bit disruptive. But on the other hand, another aspect which doesn't, have a lot to do personally with the Sun and Saturn quincunx is Black Moon Lilith being at 29 degrees, so anaretic position, anaretic degree of Leo, and Leo is the heart and the heart space. So this is not a very easy energy because whatever truth or predominant feeling is in our hearts, well, it has the tendency to explode, to erupt, to, forcefully one way or another express itself. And, Black Moon Lilith can be sometimes a little bit toxic. So, this is where we need to be careful of what we express especially non-verbally, because it can offend or it can cause a deep wounding. And speaking about wounds, also at the very beginning of the week, this Mars holds an opposition to Chiron, and Chiron is in Mars's sign, home sign of Aries. So this is where we need to be careful because, for example, certain kind of balancing out relationships can cause wounding ourselves or wounding others. And what do I say balancing out relationships? Well, I mean where sometimes negotiations have to be held, even in romantic relationship, even in marriages, even in very long-term partnerships, because life is changing, the dynamics of life is changing, our inner dynamics are changing. So the partnership, the one-on-one alliance, has to be updated, so to speak. So pursuing our interests or another person pursuing their interest while, having a conversation or any type of shape of negotiation with us, this is where it can go a little bit, misunderstandings can take place because of the Sun and Saturn aspect, and because of, Black Moon Lilith being in an erratic position of Leo. Venus herself is also in Leo, and she holds a square to Uranus. So all of these things suggest that we need to be careful of how we negotiate, what we express, what kind of tactics of methodology we use, because it might cause a kind of wounding or evoke a wounding, evoke a trauma, make the person or the person make us recall a trauma. And even when dealing with non-human in the, like, for example, institutions or an organization or a state or a job, basically a company, that is where we also need to be careful, because there is a chance for misunderstandings. Now, on the other hand, there is a lot of positivity and successful communication, because Mercury, as I said, Mercury is already direct, traversing through its shadow path, and this is where it holds the third and final trine, so a conversation of harmony, a blessing with Jupiter. Now, this can be like blessed words. This can be where a problem solution or a solution or any kind of help, generosity, Jupiter and Taurus, is promised to you, and you take it into consideration. And if you think about it, Mercury and Virgo, it could actually quite beautifully solve your situation. Now, even though this is a blessing and this is like a harmonious conversation, the rule of Jupiter is, well, speaking about it is not really enough. Wait until you actually have it, until the promise or the help or the, I don't know, gesture of kindness, the generosity is fulfilled, is concrete, and then rejoice in it. But of course, this energy can turn to something even better than expected, because later on in the week, Mercury will hold a trine with Uranus, its higher octave, and Uranus is the planet of surprises. So whatever is promised to you, or whatever, because Mercury and Jupiter trine can represent hopeful, optimistic words, valuable words, which make you feel really, really loved, appreciated, special, because this is Taurus, so it has to have a Venusian effect. But at the same time, it can, as I said, also mean generosity, and whatever is being communicated, it is not just pure mental energy, but it also does something practically in a grounded way, beneficial in your life, because Mercury in the sign of Virgo is all about, having our intellect influence physical reality, of course, in the best possible way. But later on, when Mercury will trine Uranus, that can be an even more pleasant surprise, or things not turning out the way you expected, but it's a trine, so in the positive sense, it's even better than you would expect. Or if it's like a twist and turn from fate, well, it's actually for the better. But at the same time, that can also represent breakthrough. And we must not forget that Mercury, when before it went retrograde, it could not finish, perfect its trine to Uranus, only to Jupiter. So basically, we never ever had a Mercury and Uranus trine perfecting itself. So this trine, when Mercury will perfect its trine, it's actually a fresh energy. It's quite a new energy. Because as I said, Mercury, when going retrograde, it did hold the trine with Uranus, but it could not perfect it. It could not get to the 23 degrees of Virgo, what it would have needed to perfect its trine. So that's quite a beautiful energy. But at the beginning of the week, we just have the Jupiter trine. So the promise, so it's still a faith, so it's still just a belief, or a beautiful compliment, or something that empowers you. And moving on, so on the 26th, you can see that Venus opposes the moon. So this is also the energy of a kind of agitation. For example, maybe you get overwhelmed by requests from your communication, or something that has happened in the lives of your friends or social connections. This is where the emotions of other people, or the collective emotion, like something happens in the world, especially something, Aquarian, something that influences the whole community, legislation changes which is not favorable, an austerity measure, or something happened somewhere and it, really, really stirs up feelings. So this is where you might get a little bit frustrated because of this Venus opposition. And also Venus holds the square with Uranus. Now, of course, the square is not exact yet, but it's ongoing, it's operational, and this is also Venus wrapping up her retrograde, in the sense that she's moving direct already through her shadow path. So whatever fated events might occur at this moment, these are the conclusions of the wisdom and the soul lesson, the heart-based lesson, Venus in Leo, that this Venus retrograde was meant to teach us. Let me just check. Oh, also, of course, on this day we have a true. It's not exact yet, but this aspect will stay with us most of the week, really. So that's why I'm speaking about it now. The Venus and Mars sextile. Now, a sextile is a celestial conversation, which is a blessing, but it does need something from us, either an intention for us to set an intention and hold it, an action, a communication. In this case, Venus and Mars, Venus in Leo and Mars in Venus's sign of Libra, a gesture, something to project on the other person. Of course, something beautiful, or replace person, as I said, with anything that can do with Libra. Court of justice, organization, or company, state, institution, something fictional, contract, agreement of any kind, but of course, romantic relationship, partnership, marriage, one-on-one alliances included. So this is a really, really favorable aspect where our, of course, nice and hard-based projections get us a long way, get us new alliances, even though I wouldn't really say new, because Venus is not yet out of shadow. So this, I do believe, I do sense, will still build on the Venus retrograde, but it can be something really unusual, something that catches us by surprise, like it can be in this sense, it can be a new connection, a new attraction, a new romance, a new lusty situation, if that makes sense, because Venus squares Uranus, and Venus is also the ruling planet of Taurus, where Uranus is. So this is very, very Venusian. Someone catches us by surprise. The square is where it's outside of our expectance, it's outside of our comfort zone, outside to what we're used to, and we might not really know how to react or what to do. Yet, remember, Venus retrograde already taught us certain lessons. Even if it's just philosophy, or even if it's just observing something in the life of another, it's still a lesson that we can apply to the self. But chances are these lessons were deeply personal. So, and then there is the sextile, where it promises us favorable negotiation. Value comes in our lives because Taurus is also a financial sign. It is an fixed earth sign, so it usually rules our mobile assets. So everything that we have in our lives as free resource. Immovable is ruled usually by Cancer, because that represents properties and things which do not move, don't have mobility. So properties, land, house, etc. Even though house in this day and age can be moved. So yes, that sextile is really, really good. It's good for convincing people, but when I say convincing people, through the heart, through feelings, through passion, through Leo stuff. And this is where we can help another person, because Mars is in the compassionate sign of Libra. It is in its exile, so to speak. But in this case, trust me, Mars is really good there. It's better to be in exile than extremely dominant right now. And so this Mars is also forced to take into consideration the situation, the words, the whatever of others. So this sextile is really, really good, because we can get gestures right, especially gestures based on empathy. Just be sure not to overdo it, because again, Sun is quincunx Saturn still. So, we might get empathy, Pisces, a bit over the board. And another thing I would like to mention is that all through this week, let me just show you, Venus is dancing on and off, actually on with Juno, asteroid of partnerships. So again, the Juno-Venus square, Juno-Venus conjunction squaring Uranus does suggest changes, sudden, unexpected changes in existing partnerships. Feelings can be on and off here, or a new, unusual attraction or partnership just shocks us. So I'm going to take off the asteroids not to confuse you. And as you could see, the Sun is also conjunct on this 26th with Pallas Athena, and the Sun will conjunct Pallas Athena. Pallas Athena in Libra, tactics, the wisdom of relationship, the wisdom of negotiation, communication, and the beauty of forming relationships. Now, this may, of course, also, and it will have no choice but to play out on the world stage, where Libra on the world stage is big alliances between countries, between nations. Libra is the sign of the law along with Sagittarius. So this is where old treaties being debated once again, big collective global legislation changes, for example, like one in the European Parliament. That is something collective, but in a larger sense, not just the country. Without a shadow of a doubt, changes in the US. Why? Because Pluto is starting to once again conjunct the natal Pluto of the United States, which is in the country's second house, if I'm not mistaken. So big changes, talks, negotiations about the legislation, what is lawful, what is not lawful. But at the same time, you know, the North Node is gonna perfect its conjunction with Aries, planetoid Aries, this week. So this is where protest, uh, is a cry out for sovereignty, a cry out for people to make sure that their voices, their desires, and their sovereign wills ultimately are heard. Because governors, rulers, heads of institutions, etc., well, they are nothing more than the elected of the people. So diplomats, representatives of people's will, and if they go against people's regard, and this is where, don't get me, they may say that they're, you know, working towards and serving the collective good and common sense. Yet, unfortunately or fortunately, this is where even if the will of people goes against, let's say, common sense, goes against the greater good. But if that's most people's will and you're just a representative, you have no choice but to bow. You have no choice but to respect it. And it is this theme that's gonna explode on the world stage out there, where people will try to make politicians, governors, representatives, peoples of the state, how should I say, acknowledge, but once again, so for them to be crystal clear that they have to respect the sovereign will. And you can imagine this will take the shape and form of protests, strikes, anything that has to do with workers disrupting certain institutions, anything that has to do with legislative fights, where petitions and the fight can go in courts of justice. So all of these themes are going to be really heated and, you know, dominate the global and collective events. And also, towards the end of the week, but I'm going to speak about that in greater detail, Mars will start squaring Pluto. So that will be Mars along with the South Node, which means the North Node, which means that it's a T-square. And Mars is the planet of activation. So the theme of the Pluto and nodal axis square, T-square, is going to be really heated up. It's going to be really obvious. It's going to really play out. Because, you know, also Mars is on what it's called via combusta, 15 degrees from Libra to 15 degrees of Scorpio, the path of fire. So anything that happens there is what, you know, like a forge, the heat shapes relationships, diplomacies, alliances, anything, the law, even anything like that. And Mars is, by its nature, the planet of combustion. So it's going to be quite intense collectively, politically, especially, and anything that has to do with, you know, top-down authority versus the individual, the collective, especially the individual collective Aquarius. And on this day, you can see the moon opposing Venus and moon in Aquarius. So that really emphasizes this. But let's move on. So the 22nd, 29th is another day which is relevant because Venus perfects its square with Uranus. Maybe it's the perfection is on the 30th. No, it's actually on the 20th, especially where I live. So yes, the 29th, Venus and Uranus square for the third and final time. This may be surprises, unexpected events, or unexpected attractions, but I spoke about these in the previous horoscopes in the context of this Venus retrograde. But this can also play out as great financial instability financial up and down, you know, like a sinus. It goes up and down. It's pure chaos and unexpected. And this Uranus will reveal certain new creations, for example, new currencies. And here, of course, digital currency is one part, but that's like old story. That's not even all that new. But, you know, localized currencies, where I don't necessarily speak about a new form of money, but trade, local trade, which starts to get more dominant and dominant, and that can cause, at first hand, certain kind of disruptions. But this Uranus and Venus square can also represent sudden, spontaneous decision based on the feeling in the heart. And this is where perhaps that's why Venus kind of tortured all of us during its retrograde, because as I said, this square is for the third time, that when we get to this moment, to that decision which comes like a volcano, erupts like a volcano from our hearts, and if I'm not mistaken, the fictional energy Vulcanus is also in the sign of Leo. So pretty much volcanic there. We decide something that is wise and aligned to our greater authenticity, Uranus. So I would like to think that that's how this energy plays out, that whatever bursts out from our heart, a decision, for example, it's for our greater good. And it's based on wisdom and the experience that we harvested and are still harvesting during this Venus retrograde season. But look at Mercury on this day, where Mercury is also trining Uranus, not exact yet, but it is an operational trine. So exactly, surprises, beautiful and pleasant surprises, blessed communication, thumbs up, where, for example, anything that has to do with official matters like waiting for a reply or communication from an institution, this might come, or you get the thumbs up, it's favorable. But at the same time, this can represent your own ingenious thoughts, ideas, epiphanies, sudden realizations. Your intelligence solves something in a very unique and distinct way to yourself. But at this time, Mercury is not yet in new ground. So we still need to wait for the totally fresh energy to come into play later on. But it is already very near the wrap up of the Mercury retrograde period, because Mercury is almost out of shadow. So it's a really, really good energy. Let me see what I... Oh, and of course, on this day, we have the full moon in the sign of Aries. So you can see the opposition of the sun and the moon, just that this full moon takes place at 6 degrees of the sign of Aries. But of course, if you'd like to know more about this full moon, I have a special video and I'm going to link to it down below. And also, if you like to know what all these energies mean for you personally in the context of your own chart and own house systems, I have a teaching video, tutorial video, which I'm also going to link down below, so feel free to check it out. But I would just like to say a couple of words about this Aries new full moon, Well, it's a super full moon. It will pull our emotions to the surface. It can have a touch of violence to it, because Aries is very, very assertive energy. And at this time, there is a lot of other external elements going on in the world. So we are triggered, we are agitated, our emotions are pulled to the surface. So my guidance and my advice is stay out of violence, to stay out of situation that you know can escalate very, very quickly. And also at this time, Mars holds an in conjunction with Uranus. So again, surprise, unexpected. Uranus is the planet of revolution, rebellion. spontaneous outburst. Mars, even if it's in fall in Libra, it can still, in detriment, in exile in Libra, it can still be very violent. It can still have an outburst. So on this day, at least on the 29th of September, we must really watch our temper, watch how we react to anything, regardless of what the emotion within us screams to do. And we must also be careful with negotiations because of this Mars in conjunct Uranus. But of course, this can play out also in a positive way, where a contract offer, a job offer, or a communication or something from our partners comes as a surprise, as a shock. But it is really, really up to us of how we react to this. And at the same time, at the time of the full moon, the North Node is conjunct dwarf planet Aries. So Aries, again, the rebellion. Both the North Node and Aries are square Pluto. So, Aries, the individual, my rights, my sovereignty, my sovereign will, wherever direction I aspire to go. Pluto in the sign of Capricorn, retrograde for the final time in a significant way, grinding down the old order, the structure, revealing corruption, reveal everything that the politicians, leaders, top-down authority are actually doing against our will, against what we desire. So this is conflictual. Individually speaking, this is where, how do we get where we need to be in life? How do we reclaim our power? How do we use our power? What do we do to, be true to this North Node in the sign of Aries, and also South Node in the sign of Libra, to rearrange our relationships, our alliances, our contracts, why not, in such a way where they express our true authenticity, our own truth, our own feelings, our truest Venus, if that even makes sense. So let's move on now. To the 30th, which is also very relevant. On the 30th, you can see Mars and Uranus in conjunction, quincunx being exact. Mars is very close to the South Node, so it's activating it. So the South Node in Libra, as I said earlier, it's making us release alliances, relationships, or Libra, our own ideals, our own philosophical thoughts that simply do not match our lives anymore. They do not match who we are, or a position, the North Node, because we must not forget Mars is the ruling planet of the sign where the North Node is in. So Mars's connection to the North Node is quite special. And at this moment, Mars opposes it. It stands across the sky. So that means the scream out, and sorry for using such dramatic words, but we're speaking about Mars, so this is really important. And this is where it's gonna conjunct this South Node just now. This doesn't happen very often. So this actually screams at us karmically, or deep within us, that we do need to search for balance. We do need to respect our limits, our boundaries. Do not let other people or anything that stands on the other scale of Libra to convince us, to allure us, to trick us, so to speak. But we must also be careful where we don't, how should I say, pull in the person or whatever stands on the other scale into our own ego, into our own needs. So it really, really needs to be balanced. So what is our inner truth, our inner value, and where we desire and aspire to go and progress towards life can simply not be sacrificed, because that is what the South Node demands of us. for us to express our true authentic desire, that which needs to be taken into consideration for the sake of balance and truth and honesty and equilibrium. Because that is all of what I said is keywords for Libra: truth, equilibrium, honesty, justice, and fairness. You know, one-on-one alliance should be 50-50. So this energy and this week and this full moon, and most things that do happen this, we must not forget that Juno, asteroid of partnerships, is also dancing with Venus on and off. And when I say on and off, we're speaking about 1-degree orb. So they're conjunct all the time, just that when their conjunction is more intense, more perfected. So this is where Juno and Venus are together in this. And I find that very, very, very significant, because this is when partnership, relationship, marriages, contracts, and all of this truly change quite profoundly. And we are, once again, and I'm sorry to be this repetitive, we're really, really invited to tap into the greatest depth of wisdom that we harvested not just under these retrograde, but these last couple of years, because Pluto made a very powerful, once in a lifetime, once in actually an era key connection with Saturn and other power players on 12th of January 2020 that transformed, that changed a lot, especially from within. So that means that everything that Pluto changed slowly and surely is being reflected. And as I said, Pluto being in this position is for the final time in our lifetimes in a relevant way. So it's what we are going through both individually and collectively is very, very relevant. So no matter how life looks like, feels like, even if, let's say that even though there are so very many blessings and positive energies out there, maybe for some people life seems like a total defeat this week. That is just an illusion. Do not let Neptune mess with your head, because everything will turn around, everything will change. And especially when life seems especially limitative or defeating or even cruel or simply going against us, that's the moment when we need to amp up our faith and our self-belief the most, because we're showing life how to turn around. Making just an enemy of life, or getting upset or depressed or just why me, is really, really, really not helpful at this moment, because energies are so fiery, heated, explosive. This is when we have to truly support ourselves, tap into that Jupiter. Jupiter is belief. And in Taurus, what we believe, we manifest basically. And before I don't forget, there is a really powerful manifesting aspect out there. As you see, Neptune is at 26 basically, but it holds a sextile with Uranus. It also holds a sextile with Pluto. And that means that Pluto and Uranus are in Earth signs. Earth is the recipient of the ether, of the divine mind. Earth is like a female reproductive system receiving the seed, and then it will grow. Where, the seed is our intention, the seed is our alchemy, the seed is the power or the product of our souls, the most refined and this alchemically distilled desire. And the earth is basically our reality, making it manifest. So this is also quite a powerful alignment. So it doesn't matter how life looks like, we have that inner strength to dream it to something different. This Pluto sextile and the Uranus sextile kind of guarantee that. So we must make sure that we use this Neptune in the best way possible. Now externally, it's smoke and mirrors, deceptions, lies, all of that, of course. Nothing is real. But personally speaking, this is the power of our dreams, of our deepest love. So we need to be using that very, very intensely. So let's move on to the 1st of October. And this is where we have the Mercury trine Uranus. And this is where Mercury is already in new ground. So at this moment, we can expect new things to start taking place in our lives. This is where we can expect for us to be able to practically, concretely use our plans, our epiphanies, all of our moments of ingenuity that we had under this Mercury retrograde. And at the same time, the sun is conjunct Pallas Athena. Again, wisdom, again, tactics. When sometimes the biggest wisdom is to ask for help. You might not have been able to figure this and that out, but the wisdom comes into play, especially with Libra. You have that friend, that partner, that someone who is actually an expert in that and asking for help. Jupiter favors this. Jupiter actually favors reaching out and asking for help. As you see, Mars is holding the quincunx with Uranus very, very exact, very tight, but it's also conjunct the south node, and it's starting its square to Pluto, and Pluto is the higher octave of Mars. Together they co-rule the sign of Scorpio, so this is quite a heavy energy. Challenges will definitely start arising from our partnerships. So certain partnerships basically are due to be terminated under this square. Because as I said, Mars activates the south node. South node in Libra means we need to release or balance out certain relationships. And Pluto is challenging all of that to make sure that the power dynamics are balanced or at least as fair as possible. And as I said, that power dynamics, this is where it's also job. And I can also imagine how there will be a lot of, quitting jobs or changing careers starting exactly at this moment. Actually, starting when Mars will be exactly conjunct the south node and then getting closer to perfecting its square to Pluto. So I imagine that this is which starts like a mass migration. People quitting in mass and reorienting themselves to something else. And this will cause a certain chaos because you can imagine the position that they will leave vacant will appeal to another person. So this will be like, a certain kind of quantum entanglement work-wise. But even though this sounds so easy the way I explain it, you can imagine this will cause certain companies to collapse. This will basically give power to Pluto deconstructing for the final chance for it to do whatever it needs to. You know what I mean? But at the same time, from the rubble, from the chaos, from the quantum entanglement, totally new and ingenious alliances, contracts, whatever are going to be born without a shadow of a doubt. So this is where don't judge your situation in a doomy and gloomy way, because even if it seems chaotic at the moment, it can change so quickly and truly for the better. And also this Sunday, so the 1st of October, can be quite challenging from a psychological perspective because the sun holds two minor astrological conversations that do influence our mood and psychological states more than anything. And one of these aspects is a sesqui-square. So sesqui-quadrate, which means a square and a half. So the sun, the light of our consciousness, right? Especially in Libra, where it's in fall. holds the square and half with Uranus. So again, surprise, surprise. The surprise factor, the unexpected factor, the upheaval factor, that things don't turn out the way we expected, is predominant, because the sesqui square can represent beautiful surprise that, catches us unexpectedly. And even if it's useful, joyful, delightful, whatever, it is still hard to process it and react to it. So, and another is the sun holds, and this time a semi-square, a half square with Venus, while Venus herself squares Uranus. So this means expect the unexpected, that someday there are going to be big, big, big surprises, even collectively out there, financially speaking. Venus squaring Uranus, that's enough, because Venus is the ruler of this Taurus where Uranus is in the present moment, and Venus is also the ruler of Libra where the Sun, Mars, and Pallas Athena, and the South Node are in. So this is quite how should I say, a chaotic energy that will change the landscapes. So all of us need to, as I said earlier, tap into those Pluto, Neptune, Uranus sextiles for us to be able to alchemize things in such a way where it truly serves our strongest beliefs and our soul purposes, and all of this not in a silly, naive, and illusionary way, but quite the contrary, in a really truthful way. So I would like to leave it at this. Thank you everyone for listening. Thank you for all the love, all the beautiful words, and all the shares and thumbs up. And before I don't forget, if you'd like to know how all of this means for you personally in your context, just check out the tutorial video, which attempts to teach you how to interpret your own chart. And also, if you'd like to know more about this full moon in the sign of Aries, check out that video. Thank you, everyone. If you'd like to support my work, just donate in the PayPal link in the description below. Thank you. Until next time, bye for now.